Hey there, yoga lovers! Welcome to Talk Yoga to Me. We're thrilled to have you with us today as we dive into all things yoga. Whether you're on the mat, in your car, or just relaxing at home, we're here to chat about poses, philosophy, teaching tips, and so much more. So go ahead, roll out your mat, take a deep breath, and let's get started. Jimmy, talk yoga to me.
I'd love to. Let's do it. In this episode, we're diving deep into the world of yoga workshops, what they are, why they matter, and how both teachers and students can benefit from them. Whether you're a seasoned teacher like Allison, looking to share your knowledge to students curious about exploring new aspects of their practice, um, we've got insights lined up for everybody, students and teachers alike. So let's explore what makes workshops special and how they can enhance both teaching and learning experiences.
I love it.
So, Allison, what are workshops? Just kind of a basic overview, and why do you think they're important?
So, workshops are the opportunity to kind of dive deep into a particular subject or topic. It's where you take one concept or a couple concepts that you really want to teach in depth or expand on to your students, or that you want to learn more about as a student, right? And they're really important because we all go to yoga classes and there are 60 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes where you're just flowing through class the way that your teacher has planned for you. And oftentimes we find a thing or two that we want to know more about, whether it's a particular pose, whether it is a philosophy topic, if it's something about the breath, and you don't really get to fully deep dive into that in a single class. So a workshop is your opportunity to learn more about it or teach more about it to your students.
Yeah, I love that because you can't stop a class and workshop something with students to explain something in depth. So it sounds like a good place to work on the specifics of different aspects of yoga.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever taught a workshop?
I haven't. So yeah, no workshops yet. Still early on. Maybe year two I'll do it. But I do like to workshop things with students in a not so formal setting after class. So sometimes, students ask about how do we, like today actually I had one after class, how do we get in a better posture for down dog?
Okay.
And so being able to talk the student through in more detail what the cues are that I give in class, but breaking it down into like showing her, hey, this is where I'm not pressing into my arms and I've got this angle between my shoulders and my upper body. We want to focus on finding that length. So, but I love workshops as far as a student learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So question on workshopping things with students after class. How do you make students feel comfortable asking you questions?
Usually, it's not with new students. So you're right, there is a comfort level thing
Mm-hmm.
that has to be established. And I think talking about things outside of yoga helps, you know what I mean? To
Yeah.
establish that rapport with the student. So, for instance, today it's actually my first grade teacher who asked me. So I've known
That's
her
so
since I was a little kid.
cool.
So there's no extra like
Yeah.
comfort needed. But I think about some other students who have asked me questions who I don't have that connection with
Mm-hmm.
from like history. And it's through like talking to them on a one-on-one basis, perhaps about yoga, but perhaps not. And then over time, that comfort level develops. It's where even like after your class yesterday, there was a student, I wasn't the teacher, but I teach that student a lot, and she asked me about our half splits, what are the variations? She's
Mm-hmm.
not feeling it in her hamstring, so how can we adjust where her hips are so that she's getting more of that
Yeah,
benefit?
that's
So
awesome.
you're right, it is a big thing, but transitioning into like you putting that on a new student could be uncomfortable
It could
unless you
be
already have that.
uncomfortable, right? But also don't be afraid to ask your teachers questions.
Yeah.
It's part of the learning, right? It's part of the experience. And I think that every yoga teacher that I've ever met has been more than willing and excited to when a student asks them a question about class or about a pose or about a topic, and they get to dive a little bit deeper into it. So even as a student, like, don't be afraid, right, to
Yeah.
ask these questions, whether you're new, seasoned, not. But it also sounds like, consistency helps with that.
Yeah. But that's true. Definitely as a student, like as a teacher, I love getting those questions because it gives me the time to do something different, and
Yeah.
talk to them on a deeper level. And I think a lot of teachers enjoy that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what about the workshops that you attended?
Yeah, I have attended a few. A lot of them are inversion workshops. I think
Hmm.
that's a really popular thing that people want to do because it can be dangerous to just pop a bunch of people into handstands if it's not regularly in their practice.
Right.
And I'm definitely still learning to get inverted more. And those are always great. I love that the camaraderie that you get out of workshops where everyone gets to know each other better because it's not a quiet structured class. It is a collaboration, and you get to see yourself grow really quick in an hour and a half to 2 hours, and also the people around you. So a lot of inversion workshops, um, and then as well as some on like sun salutations, getting the
Hmm.
specifics and different dristies in each pose and the different variations that you're kind of aspiring to as you enhance your practice. Um, what about you? What workshops do you have you enjoyed taking or teaching?
So workshops that I have taught, I remember my very first workshop. I had just graduated my first 200-hour YTT, and I taught a workshop to the next YTT group. I had a really strong home practice, and so my workshop was building a home practice. It was like, how do you do yoga at home? Because we all want to go to classes. They don't always fit in our schedule. So, doing workshops at home, doing yoga at home is really important for your practice. Um, that was fun, and it taught me a lot about building a workshop. I've also taught like a workshop that I turned into a series. So I called it Flow to Crow, and it was a 4-week workshop where we worked on flows that eventually brought us to crow or included crow once we kind of learned the basics of them. I've done chaturanga workshops, so like anatomy of the shoulders was really fun. And then throughout YTT, we've workshopped so many different topics within the training that we've been leading. So I've taught a lot of workshops and it's a lot of fun. But like you, the workshops that I tend to attend are inversion and hand balance workshops,
Mm.
which are always really fun for me because inversions are hard and practicing them on your own, while it's great, you learn so much from practicing with experienced teachers. And just because you've done one workshop on a topic that you enjoy doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it again, because the person you're taking it from the second time, if it's the same person, they've learned more, they have new information to give in a different way, or if it's a different person, you have something else to absorb
Yeah.
from them, type thing. So you can learn a lot by doing similar worksheets or workshops repeatedly. And that's a lot of fun too. So I've also done a couple workshops where I've taken them on like pranayama, taken them on like chakras and things. And those are always really eye opening because I think we're all really attracted to the physical side of yoga at first. And then when you kind of learn about the meditation, the pranayama, the chakras, like the energy systems, it's really eye opening and can just expand on your yoga practice
Yeah.
in that way. So,
Yeah, I love
yeah.
that. And it's true too, like doing an inversion workshop as well as the teacher learning, our comfort level starts to
Mm-hmm.
increase as we're getting more used to being upside down. And then the teacher can help us grow from there too. I agree, like to retaking workshops is you're always learning something new.
Yeah,
It's always helpful.
absolutely. And inversions are always my favorite. And every time I learn something new, and suddenly something that didn't click before clicks now, and I'm like, wow,
Right.
this is so amazing. So,
Yeah.
highly recommend taking workshops. And there's also workshops for everybody, right? Like, you don't have to be a yoga teacher to take workshops, but yoga teachers should also take workshops, not just teach them.
Hmm.
Because you learn so much and you learn different perspectives and different ways to kind of learn the material, which is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Allison, what inspired you to start teaching workshops?
Kind of like how we just discussed, the fact that you don't have time in a regular 60-minute class to dive deep into a topic with people. But when you talk to somebody after class and they have questions on things, sometimes you don't even have time to like dive deep into it there, right? Like if after class somebody's like, "Hey, I really want to learn how to do an inversion." Like you can go over it with them a little bit and try to help them. If they have experience, that's helpful. Or if you're new to it, you can start to kind of develop building blocks gently in a way. But if you're getting asked questions that are consistent and things you like to teach often, it's nice to bring it into a workshop setting because then you have a full block of time set aside to teach something specific. And what you teach in that class, your students can then bring back into their practice. And that's kind of what inspired me to start teaching workshops was helping students build on their knowledge and applying these things back to their classes. And you can do that with whether it's asana, pranayama, meditation, or energy things. You can do that with all of it, and students can translate that back to the classes they already go to. So I think it's a nice way to help your students learn and grow. And
Yeah.
also, you as a teacher grow. When you teach a workshop, you really need to research and plan. So, we all have topics that we love learning about or love teaching. And you really do a deep dive as a teacher too, to be like, I really want to teach people how to chaturanga correctly because I teach vinyasa. We do it a lot. So now I'm going to dive even deeper into the anatomy of the shoulder, into the history of the pose, into all the purpose things, and build a workshop from there, right? So it helps you as a teacher grow, it helps your students as students grow, and it's usually something you can carry forward with you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, so with the workshops that you've been to, what were some of the key elements that made them successful?
Yeah, I think starting out with the introduction, like allowing people to speak about themselves. Obviously, you give an introduction of what people can expect that day,
Yeah.
but people are so used to in a class you don't talk, as much. So breaking that barrier of going around the room and having everyone introduce themselves, talk about what they're trying to get out of the class or the workshop, and that automatically starts to bring kind of this different level of collaboration to the workshop. And then warming up, I think that's really important. Having a 10, 15 minutes to get our bodies prepared for whatever it may be. If it's, a meditation workshop or a pranayama, maybe it's just grounding. But if it's an inversion, maybe we're doing some vinyasa or some sun sals, whatever it may be. And then, yeah, giving people variations to play. One of our teachers, Abby, does a really great job with her inversion workshops and her weekly inversion class to give people these kind of what you're talking about building blocks of places you can start and feel comfortable and play around with different props maybe to get yourself to the next level slowly over time.
That's a really good point because workshops don't make something possible in 90 minutes, right? Like an inversion workshop doesn't mean that you're going to walk away being able to do a handstand in the middle of the room. It's going to help you walk away with the tools that you need to practice, and through consistency, you may or may not find that one day, right? I always think that's important to note with workshops, especially the asana ones.
And not, letting the expectations kind of fall a little and know that like this is a process. You're not going to come out, pressing yourself up into a handstand in the middle of the room after one 90-minute workshop or even hour. How do you decide on themes or topics? I know we kind of talked about that a little bit, but what, for instance, like what brought you to want to teach the Chaturanga workshop?
Well, I like to come up with workshop ideas based on kind of the things that I enjoy as a teacher, and also the things that I see as I teach classes. So, also feedback from students. So, I like the Chaturanga workshop because as a vinyasa teacher, I know that shoulders are one of the most common injuries in yoga classes when you were doing a lot of chaturangas because your shoulders aren't designed to bear weight. And oftentimes in yoga classes, that's what they're doing. We're putting a lot of weight into our shoulders. And there are a lot of compensations that happen when you don't properly do a chaturanga, which can lead to injury. So my goal with that was to help my students understand chaturanga to prevent injury and to help their practice flow a little bit more smoothly. And that's kind of how I take my inspiration. We do crows when I teach rocket yoga. So it's always fun to do workshops on crows, but that's also one of those really hard poses. You're not guaranteed to get it just because you attended a crow workshop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun to do as a 4 week series where we learned about the foundation of crow in week 1, and then it was to practice your foundation until we met again on week 2. And then in week 2 it was like, all right, now we're going to start to build a little bit on crow. Here are modifications for it. Week 3, we're going to start to build it into a flow. And it was fun to watch people grow from that, and then week after week see progress, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So my inspiration always usually comes from my students, but also what I feel comfortable teaching. There are definitely things where I'm like, I would rather go take a workshop on certain things. I'm not going to do a workshop on handstands right now because I don't do handstands like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not teaching them in classes like that often. I like to take meditation workshops more than I like to teach meditation workshops because I think that's something that I'm always kind of absorbing and I like to learn more about, but not something that I personally will sit down and be like, hey, everybody, I'm going to teach you about meditation today, right? I can teach you about it in little bits and pieces, but maybe not in a 90-minute setting at this point. Something I'd love to do in the future.
But that's great. Like the two kind of main silos of like, if you're a teacher and you're interested in workshops, silo one is what you're good at, what you see people need more information on. You can teach those.
Yeah.
But also as a student of workshops, where are you looking to expand your knowledge? What are you trying to implement more in your class? Maybe you, like me, pranayama is a little nerve wracking still. So taking those workshops from the same teacher or multiple teachers to
Right.
get more knowledge and perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because you know something doesn't mean that you want to do a workshop on it for any reason whatsoever. I also think that workshops need to have, they don't need to necessarily, but I think like having something like tangible that you give your students, whether it's a handout, a teaching tool that they can use, or a journal prompt or something, so that they can continue with what they've learned even after they leave class.
It's a good idea. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, like almost like yoga homework, if you will.
Yeah. But then, because you forget what's said in class or in
Yeah.
the workshop, and then now they have something to look back on. Oh yeah, those were the cues, or this is the framework that helps me.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a good practice. It's not something that you have to do, and it doesn't mean that a workshop wasn't great if you don't get a handout. But it's something that I think it can be important if you have the time, energy, and resources to incorporate that into your workshops. Even if it's just a sheet to be like, hey, we're taking notes if you want, right? Like leaving with little, or if we do a workshop where we're recording something, say we're doing inversions, it's like, hey, break out your phone and record that. That's
So
your takeaway,
true. Yeah.
It's good stuff like that. I think that covers the themes.
Yeah.
For that. What benefits do you think students gain from attending workshops?
Definitely deepening knowledge on whatever the topic may be. That's kind of the core of why we go. But outside of that, um, it helps build confidence in yoga because you're getting to meet other people who like yoga and talk outside of a structured, quiet yoga studio class.
Right.
So you hear other people's perspective on what worked and get to make new friends. So at the same time as you're building community, you're also deepening your own knowledge and practice of yoga. I think there's so many benefits that are inside those kind of three main categories, but even outside. of just getting to know the teachers even better if you're
Yeah.
a student, and it helps to develop a better understanding the next time you take that teacher's class of what they mean when they cue something. So you know the backstory to it, the hour and a half version of the 3 word cue. So it helps you be able to bring that back up when you're taking that class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
What tips do you have for people who are new to teaching and they want to lead their first workshop, like me? Which I don't know that I'm
Yeah.
ready to, but
You're
yeah, what kind of.
absolutely ready
I have no idea what it'd be on,
to.
but
I am just okay, so I'm a planner obviously. I say just pick a topic and do it. If I hadn't when I taught my very first workshop, I wouldn't have chosen how to build a home practice without the studio owner at the time being like, "Hey, can you teach a workshop on how to build a home practice? Because I feel like people should know that." And I was like, "Oh, okay, actually, I think I can." And then I had 90 minutes, and I was like, "How am I going to cover this in 90 minutes?" And it becomes a little bit like it's like planning your first 60-minute yoga class, right? It's a little bit daunting at first, and you're like, "Oh no, I'm so scared. What do I do?" So it's important to plan, and I like to kind of plan in segments, like you said. So there's like you have your intro, your opening, your kind of what are we doing and why are we here type thing, and then you break it out into what you're teaching. So there's going to be an information piece, there's going to be a learning piece, there's going to be an application piece, and that's typically how I like to do mine, and then like a Q&A at the end and a closing. Um, when I taught my workshops, I still ended them with Shavasana.
Yeah.
I was like, we just learned a lot. Let's lay down, rest, absorb,
Integrate it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then close when we're done. So I think having structure is really important. Time management is really important. It's also okay to tell students like, hey, this is a 90-minute workshop, but I'll be here for 2 hours. You're welcome to leave at any point, like once we're done type thing. If you have the time and space on the schedule to do that. But I think that do your research, plan in advance, have time stamps for it, and also don't be scared to market yourself along the way. Like invite your students to your workshop, share it on social media if you use social media, make a flyer for printing out and sharing with people. Like don't be afraid to kind of put yourself out there and be like, hey, come to my workshop. And usually I always suggest inviting 1 or 2 people for free to just be like, hey, just come. This is me practicing. It's my first one. I want feedback, so I want you there type thing.
Yeah.
I think that's always really nice too.
Those are really great tips.
Yeah, thank you.
I feel more confident already.
Yeah, it's something, and you can pick a topic. Like, you don't have to have these huge, crazy topics. It can be something really, really simple. Like, we've done workshops on props, we've done workshops on Shavasana, we've done workshops on sun salutations, we've done workshops on Chaturanga. It doesn't have to be like this crazy theme workshop. It can be something really simple, and you'll be surprised how many people want to learn more about it. Have there been any topics that you've thought about?
Just recently now, and I'm not skilled enough yet to do it, but I say have no hamstrings because like I literally, I don't know, I don't feel anything in my hamstrings very rarely. But getting into something of like kind of the pancake, like the working on
Yeah.
our split/pancake, like getting our wide leg forward fold and focusing on our hip hinge in that, because I see so many people round down.
Yes.
And that, I mean, it's the same in a forward fold too.
Yep.
It's all that same mechanics. It's just more intense when you're not able to bend your knees and send your glutes back, and while you're standing. But I don't know that I could build a workshop around that. But I don't
You
know.
absolutely
That's
could.
what
Give
first comes to
yourself
mind.
some credit. Oh my gosh, I love it. That's a great idea, because how many people struggle with tight hamstrings? How many people
And hips.
yeah, hips struggle with forward folds and need the knowledge and permission on how to fold effectively when your hamstrings are screaming at you the whole time. You know, like that could be so great. I think you go for it. I think you'd be surprised how great it'll be. And workshops don't have to be 90 minutes, right? They can be 60 minutes, they can be 75, they can be 90, they can be 120. Like, you have so many options. Like,
yeah, that's true.
If you're like, I don't know how we're going to forward fold for 90 minutes, I'll make it 60.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, people's hamstrings would be, even mine would be feeling something after an hour of that. So.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's great. I think you should totally try it. How do you think, based on the workshops you've been to and kind of advice for new students, how can they get the most out of workshops?
Yeah.
Like, what was the workshop you got the most out of?
All of them. I mean, honestly, like, you just go to them first off. Like, that's my biggest advice. And be open to learning, being open to a different perspective. As a student and a teacher student, everyone's got a different perspective on how to hold poses, how to move through poses. And just because it's not what you're used to doesn't mean you can't learn something from it. So staying open.
And we also get to, when you're in workshop settings, you also get to have an open conversation with your teacher where they're like, hey, you move this way, you think this way, you practice this thing. And you're like, that doesn't work for me. And it gives them the opportunity and you the opportunity to learn a different way to do it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a two-way, there's two-way communication there, which is really nice.
Absolutely. Because like the human variation factor, as a student, you don't have the time in a class to bring up like, hey, like my hip feels like it's like fused, it's just never bent that way. Like that's my mother. She in a cross-leg position, her one knee is always up because her hip, she thinks it's fused, and maybe it is, I don't know, but it doesn't open, so it doesn't hinge open. So it's like then you get that opportunity as a student. Okay, how can, like, teacher help me, how can I work through this or around it? And absolutely, as a teacher, learning that from your student, especially if it's someone who comes often, then you can help them in your own classes, but also there's going to be someone else who has that same issue. And we just don't know it until, you know, you're able to have that conversation back and forth that a class doesn't allow. But yeah, and then it adds into the integration of the student's practice of these deeper understandings of a posture, a pose, you know, a philosophy, whatever it may be, and it gives you a better base as a student to know what they're talking about when they mention it just subtly in class, and it gives it more depth. So just go to them. You know, if something kind of interests you, and maybe you're not even sure if it interests you, you don't know, just try it out, because workshops are a great experience to get more connected with your yoga studio and the community that you're in. But workshops are fantastic. Yeah, it's great for both teachers and students, as we talked about, and we love to see our students as teachers come in and get to have more conversations and be in more depth. But also as a student, before I became a teacher, it was always a cool way to learn more and dive into the practice deeper. So we appreciate you all hanging out with us on this episode of Talk Yoga to Me. We hope you enjoyed our chat about workshops and feel inspired to either teach one or perhaps attend more. So remember, it's all about expanding your horizons and finding the joy in your yoga journey.
Until next time, keep exploring and talk yoga to me again soon. Bye.
Bye.